Twitter is a platform that most of you have heard of. It's been called the digital town square of our time and is responsible for connecting millions of people around the world. It connects us to our friends and connects us to new conversations through recommendation algorithms that facilitate this connectivity, expanding our friendships and our conversations and encouraging us to engage further on the platform. It's one thing if Twitter's proprietary algorithms are encouraging us to expand conversations from, say, cat content to dog content, but it's another thing if these recommendation algorithms are encouraging us to engage and connect over hateful or extremist content. So principally, our goal is to understand how Twitter networks form around harmful content and whether or not recommendation algorithms might contribute. And if they do contribute, we can encourage social media platforms like Twitter to enact policies that disrupt the connectivity and prevent extremist communities from forming in the first place. My name is Lauren Wool, and I've just set the scene for my project I undertook with the Home Office as part of my faculty fellowship. We're particularly interested in understanding how harm networks form around white supremacist and nationalist ideology. So let's lay out the hypothesis clearly. Let's say Emma wrote a nasty tweet online and Tim replied. We want to know how Tim came to engage with this content. The simplest explanation is that Tim is friends with Emma, so he sees her content regularly. But a more indirect explanation could be that Tim follows Dan, who follows Emma, and maybe Dan retweets Emma's stuff into Tim's timeline. The third, more convoluted explanation is that Tim found the content through a background function or algorithm that recommended Emma's tweet to Tim. Essentially, we want to see if we can disambiguate engagements that occur between friends, which suggest one kind of network dynamic, versus engagements that occur between non-friends, which suggest a different sort of network dynamic. But what do we mean by harmful? Twitter already has lots of policies to prohibit a lot of the most severe or violent content. So we're interested in content that's not prohibited necessarily, but that shares features of more extreme views. So for this project, we chose the phrase mass migration because one, a lot of people talked about it online, and two, a lot of that talk showed themes that overlapped with white supremacist ideology. So in order to get some data from Twitter in the first place, we built a custom toolbox in Python to interface with the API. And with this toolbox, we can extract tweets that have the phrase that we care about, mass migration. It extracts the authors of all of these tweets, and then it gets a list of all the users that these authors mention. And lastly, it extracts all the users that these authors follow. So the mentions let us see who's talking to whom, and the friends list lets us see who's friends with whom. First, we want to see if the conversation contained features that could be related to white nationalist attitudes. So in order to do this, we applied natural language processing and semantic clustering to identify discrete attitudes. And indeed, we can see here that the data cluster really well. This is a 2D plot where every point is a tweet. And I draw your attention down here in green, we can see a cluster of tweets with very clear anti-immigrant sentiment. People are using the words illegal, immigration, crisis, and throng. And over here in yellow, we have another very distinct cluster of tweets, but these tweets mention Twitter platform account alternative, which is curious until we remember that about halfway through this project, on the 27th of October to be exact, Elon Musk purchased Twitter, and then everyone started to discuss a mass migration to another platform. Nonetheless, we've got the tweets that contain anti-immigrant sentiment, and we can use these tweets to examine two networks, the engagements between users, again, who's talking to whom, and the relationship, who's friends with whom. And we can map the conversation exactly like this. So here is a network in which the nodes or the blue dots represent individual users, and each one of these white lines represents a tweet that was shared between two users. These are the engagements. This network contains 1,500 users, more or less, and about 2,000 engagements. Which is a quite richly connected network. But remember, we have the engagements shown here, but we also know the relationships between each of these users, which isn't shown, but that we know who's basically friends with whom. And if we examine this, the engagements in red reflect an interaction between users who are not friends. And if you're looking at this graph and it seems like quite a lot of edges, you'd be right. 63% of all the engagements shown in this conversation are actually not between friends. Moreover, we find 1 in 5 users have a label we call interlopers. These are users who engage in the conversation, but never ever with anyone that they're friends with. So this strongly suggests that the network dynamics at play here are not based on existing user relationships, but are based perhaps on something else. So what's the impact of this? Well, first, we've put forth a semi-audited method that inspects harmful attitudes on Twitter. And two, we find that much of the engagement on Twitter occurs between people who are not friends. Network dynamics cannot be explained by underlying relationships. And while it's too early to tell if Twitter algorithms are fully responsible for these dynamics, it certainly gives us a roadmap for pursuing a more complete answer with further research. Thanks.